Liz come in the green room. Keelan, think about that. Good idea. We'll have great questions for Liz, but let's get her right into it. Dude, she's a world champ. You don't want to waste any of her time. Let's introduce Liz Carmouche to the show. Liz, how are you?
I'm great. Thank you. How are you?
Good. Doing good. How's everything? Did you guys have a good little Memorial Day weekend? Everything going good in your life?
Yeah, I honestly didn't really realize it was a holiday. I'm really horrible about that, especially in a fight camp.
Yeah, June 13th,
and I was like, I was like, I keep going to all the gyms and they're closed today. I guess I'm going to do my own workouts. Like, whatever, no big deal. And I even confirmed with coaches and they're like, yeah, Monday. I'm like, why aren't you here then? I don't understand what's going on. I'm like, oh, Memorial Day. That makes sense.
I love it. Well, Liz, first and foremost, I myself, at least personally, is a huge, massive fan of you. Appreciate me with 2 daughters of my own, everything you've done in trailblazing and female MMA and everything of that nature. So thank you. Huge fan of you. I kind of want to start there, then we'll kind of prolong in the Bellator days and now in the PFL days, going for $1 million, everything of that nature. Fighting Ronda Rousey, right, February on the 13th, UFC 157. I want to know, how close was that damn choke? How close was that rear naked on Ronda Rousey, Liz?
I mean, I think I was a white belt. I think I was a blue belt at that time, right? And so I felt like it was in, but you know how often you train with the blue belt and they're like, yeah, you think you got that? And they're like, whatever, this whimsical idea of yours, it's nothing, right? But I trained with Justin Flores now and he confirmed that the choke was all the way in. It was good. I damaged her jaw. That just shows the grit and how much she wanted it because he was willing to like, hey, I'll try and adjust, open my mouth. I went over her teeth. Like, I'm guessing I have to break her teeth, do whatever. And she gritted through it and was able to endure. I've since modified it and made sure that anybody gets there, you're going to suffer and you're going to tap. You're not getting out of this.
One more, then we'll give it to John, then we'll throw it to you, Keelan. You made your debut in 2010. It's crazy to say, 2010 professional debut. 2024, still fighting in the summer. Big fight, like I said, June 13th, Mohegan Sun, $1 million PFL. Would you ever imagine in 2010 that you would still, 1, be fighting in 2024, and 2, maybe the top of your game? You're at the peak. Got great wins. It seems like everything is falling into place for you, at least professionally.
Yeah, if you had told me when I started in 2010, not at all. I mean, I started and I was like, wow, this is awesome. I'm just going to enjoy the journey and see where it takes me. Maybe I make an amateur debut. Maybe I make a professional debut and get to continue from there. But at that time, women's MMA wasn't a lifestyle. It wasn't something you could do full time. Every MMA fighter worked particularly in California, worked multiple jobs and was a hobbyist doing MMA. So there was no possibility for a future with it. So if you had told me fast forward, and this is what I'll do full time as a legit professional fighter, I tell you, you're out of your mind.
Crazy. Guess I'm done.
I want to say thank you for doing it though, because you're one of the reasons why it's gotten so big over the years. Like you're a living legend in the women's MMA community, not just MMA community, but also the MMA community. I'm sorry. But I coach a few female fighters. I just want to know if there's anything you want to tell them as they're coming up through the amateurs. I have a couple MMA and boxing, just any words of advice for them.
Yeah, I think that most women get into it and they're hoping that, they see women on TV and they're going to go into a gym and there would be like a large group of women. They go in there and oftentimes they're the only female in a practice, in a class, in a training session, and they just constantly are looking for the camaraderie of training with other females. And so, man, I just say to stick through it, that oftentimes being the only female in a group where it's men isn't a downfall. It's certainly difficult, right? But there are certain things you go through. And I'm like, man, I can't explain to the guys that that's why I suck today, right? And they don't understand when I was just on fire a week ago. Or you're just having hardships and you're more emotional than the men, or they're stronger than you and you're getting ragdolled around. You're like, man, if this is a girl, there's no way this should be happening to me, right? It only happens because of the guy. But just the reassurance that it's all worth it. And that, the one times, like I got to do the FemFasion at the beginning of this year or the end of last year. And I have never been in one building with so many women training together. And all of us had the same stories of, I'm the only female training at my gym. I'm the only one in my jiu-jitsu class, my MMA class, but to come together and just have one opportunity to share your stories and unite made all those difficult days worth it just for that one weekend. And so the same thing, as long as they continue, and this is a dream and they love, you just have to follow the path of loving the sport and training the sport and kind of drop the idea of ever having camaraderie with women, because it's probably not going to happen.
Love it. Keelan, you got something for Liz?
Liz, first of all, lovely to talk to you. Thank you for joining us in Fight Bananas. It's so cool to have you on the show.
Thank you.
Liz, I actually have a question for you. You probably won't remember this, but this is a funny little story for the Fight Bananas crew here. We've actually met before. Do you remember where?
No, where?
We met 2 years ago, Bellator 279 in Hawaii.
You're gonna have to give me more than that. I get hit in the head for a living. This memory is awesome.
I didn't know this. Keelan keeping his secrets.
Yeah, the reason I mention it is, and the reason I remember it is, I remember being at that event. Obviously, I stick out to a lot of people for a lot of different reasons. And you were sat cage side at that fight, and I can tell the people here, you are one of the coolest champions I have ever met in person. So thank you for taking all those stupid pictures with me. I really, really appreciate it. Even still, I really appreciate it. But Liz, my question for you is on maybe a slightly more sort of topical, humorous sort of point. You fought for basically all the major companies and you fought basically everywhere in the world. Where is your favorite location that you've ever fought?
So I would say probably my favorite location would have been Prague, because it was my first, what I would really consider international opportunity fighting outside of that. Like my first time fighting was in Mexico, right? And that's where I made my debut for fighting, as my first few fights were in Mexico. But Prague was my first time getting to really use my passport and travel internationally and get that experience of trying to learn a new language, new culture, new food, and really get to put myself in a new comfort zone and hear an entire stadium booing against me, legitimately not knowing, coming up when I'm in the Mexico stadiums and everybody's booing against me, it fueled me. And I was like, that's okay, I'm going to finish her. But I was like, man, something could happen poorly. And legitimately, it's not like I can just cross back over to the United States. Like, I'm an 18-hour flight. If something bad happens, like, this is some bad territory. I don't know what happens. But also that kind of made it exciting, right? It made it thrilling to have that little bit of anxiety and that chaos. And then getting to have like my bucket list item where I've always wanted to see Prague and see the grandfather clock and the beautiful architecture. And I think that was probably my first time doing it. And then my favorite, because it's the only one where I really got to travel out and see new things.
And do you have any countries that you'd still like to fight in that you haven't had the chance to yet?
Everywhere. I just want to fight everywhere. Like I thought getting into fighting, like once I went to Prague, I'd let them know, like, hey guys, I will make the effort to learn every language of a place that I go to. And I may butcher it, but I'll at least try. And I'll learn the customs and be respectful. Like I grew up in another country, so I understand being a representative of the country that you're coming from and trying to do the best you can for that. So you can put me there and I'm not be the drunk mess that's going to go out in town and cause chaos and be on the news on the front page and like kicked out of the country. Like, I'll never be that person. Please send me. And I thought like, oh, this is it. This is what I'm going to do. And then I only got 2 fights overseas and we went to COVID. I'm like, oh man. So I thought they're like, oh, cool. This is going to be a new thing. So I would love that opportunity. Like really I just think that there's so much to experience in the world and so much different than the cultures we get accustomed to that I want to see it all.
I love that.
Come to Ireland. We'd love to have you.
Oh, yeah, I would love to be on Ireland.
That's very true. A lot of kind of sometimes good or even bad kind of media has been happening with that PFL Bellator merger. There's been some fighters saying, hey, they haven't been good with communication. You had such a great run in Bellator. So funny. When I was looking you up in the last couple of days, I'm like, wow, dude, Liz had an incredible run. One of the best runs in Bellator, period. But now with fighting the PFL, fighting the championship, and I do got a flyweight question for you here in a second. How has your example and your communication and everything that's happening with you in the PFL within the last 4 or 5 months for you?
Yeah, everything's been relatively smooth. I do feel like there were some hiccups along the way, but having been a part of Strikeforce when they got bought out by the UFC and getting literally zero communication, like that's kind of makes it really easy when your standard is all the way down here. Anybody that exceeds even a little bit, right, is you're like, oh, wow, this is great. So I'd set the bar really low and PFL far exceeded that. And then when I actually got to meet the staff and see like the presentations that they were doing with everything for the fight, the production team, seeing the media that they were trying to build out, how they're trying to help everybody on social media. That was way more that was going on. So for me, it's been a great transition and something I've been excited for and really grateful that it happened.
Very cool. Very cool. I got one more, then John, we'll go back to you then, Keelan. To me, there's yourself, probably the bet-in favorite in the flyweight PFL championship. Talia Santos came from the UFC, a really great run, a really close fight against Valentina Shevchenko. And then there's Dakota. Dakota's the young kind of maybe mystery girl that we've been seeing. It seems like, and they're keeping you three apart for a reason. Do you feel the same thing? Do you think it's going to be a combination out of you three towards the end? Of course, we're never looking over June 13th. We know one fight at a time, but it does seem like the PFL knows yourself, Santos, and Dakota. They got something really good brewing in the summer months in the fall for their championship.
Yeah, that was definitely the two people that were really on my radar as sticking out. Dakota, because I feel like she's been so overlooked for everything that she accomplished, and that she's the UK champion. She's experienced the season, knows the format, succeeded, and was able to go on and had all those wins. So I think a lot of people are kind of downplaying the success of what she was able to achieve by doing that. But that to me is a standout, and she's adapted and grown with each of her fights and is only looking to do more than that. So that to me is somebody to watch out for. Like when you have somebody that's repetitive and doing the same thing over and over, everybody can cue in on what their style is. You can't do that with Dakota. It's an evolving person. So that's really exciting. And then of course with Santos, what she was able to achieve in the UFC, those are two people to watch out for that I think are definitely the two other troubling prospects in the season for me.
Nice.
So I'm going to go the other route. I'm going to say, so you go through, you wipe these two chicks off out of the way. You win the $1 million. You're sitting high, pretty. Now you're former Bellator. Now you're the PFL champion. You won the mill. You've had a long, beautiful career. Do we take the mill and we walk away? Or are we going for a back-to-back and we're going to try to pull a Sean O'Connell and a Kayla Harrison on it?
I think as long as I feel healthy at the end of the season, right? This will be the first time in years that I've had this close proximity of fights back to back. I started off my professional career with 8 or 9 fights in the first year, and I thought that was the tempo. And then since then, it's been 1 to 2 fights a year. So we'll see how my body holds up. I feel like if it holds up well at the end of this season, I'm going to ask them to run it back and add a 135 and make a run for the 135 title.
Hell yeah. All right. I like that.
Key?
Liz, I'm going to be completely honest. I was going to ask you something pretty similar, but John kind of already took us down that road. So I'm going to have to be like you, and I'm going to have to think on my feet here. No, my question is, you've been...
Get off the center line, Keelan. Get off the center line, all right?
No, Dave kind of said it very well at the beginning. You've been a real pioneer of women's MMA. You've been around since the beginning. You've seen it from its origins, and you've probably seen it now towards the best it's ever been. My question for you is, in, say, the next 5-10 years, where do you see women's MMA evolving to? Where do you think the glass ceiling is? Do you think there is a glass ceiling? And really for you, how far do you think? Because I think when we look at people like Dakota Ditcheva, and we look at Taila Santos, and we look at, the women in the UFC and the women in Bellator, I don't see any limits to how far this can go. But as someone who not only has been there, but is doing it, what do you think of women's MMA at the moment, and how far do you think we can take this thing?
I think there's going to be a cap on possibility just for societal norms and safety reasons, right? Like we could, one, abolish that 12-6 elbow. It's the exact same as a curve on it as a 12-6. If anything, have more momentum, right? So outside of like changing the rules to maybe include soccer kicks, adaptations, we will certainly reach like a level of, there's going to be a cap of possibility. We start adding more weight classes, having additional, because like for the females, you look at PFL alone, there's not many opportunities for women. You look at the UFC, right? The smaller weight classes have to go to one championship. They have to go to Risen. They have to go to Japan and get outside the United States. So that is limiting the possibility within the United States and the other organizations. So we're going to see more increases there by adding weight classes. We can see more adaptations when we change the rules. And you can look as we start to have people like Kayla Harrison and everyone else has been competing and training since they were 4 years old, 3 years old, right? By the time that they decided to become martial artists, they're black belts in it at minimum one martial art, if not multiple, right? You see with the Rules-Tola brothers, black belts in jiu-jitsu, but they also wrestled and they also did judo, right? So when they're deciding like, hey, we're thinking about doing MMA, they're being a little bit quiet about it, but they're training boxing and they're training Muay Thai and kickboxing. They're just waiting to like really officially say it until they feel like they're at a professional level. So by the time that they go out there, everybody's like, oh, they're going to be slouches. Like, no, they're already at the black belt level. They just weren't telling you guys, right? So I think more and more we're going to run into people that are doing this since they're children. So by the time they get into it, we're talking about this complete martial artist. It's a black belt and 4 different styles, right? So that's going to be exciting. But eventually, like, you can only do so much where we can only add so many weight classes. We can only have so many belts, so many styles, where of course there's going to be a limit. But I do think that we're not there yet. And that's going to be quite a few more years before we can reach the limits of what everybody's possible.
Awesome. Great answer, Liz. Hey, Liz, we appreciate you. Appreciate your time. June 13th, back under the PFL umbrella. Big fight because of how the points go and the structure and who you might fight in the first or the second round, stuff of that nature. June 13th, Mohegan Sun. Liz, we wish you nothing but the best. And we really appreciate your time today. Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Awesome. Have a good day, Liz. Thank you.
Thank you.
There you go. Liz Carmouche, PFL Flyweight. Absolute living legend.